Yu-Gi-Ohs and card collectors of all kinds. Welcome back to my daddy's channel. I'm Kaiba here, and I'm here to do a new type of video with my daddy. That's right, Kaiba. We're here to do a response video. I've never done a response video before, and we're going to try to do one today. A lot of you know this guy. This is Paul from APS. No, I forget which one he is. I should know this, but off the top of my head, I can't remember the name of their channel. Anyways, I'm here today because he's been putting out a lot of takes lately, and I really don't know what to say about some of them. But this one here, just by the title, I think is going to be one of the most interesting ones of all. Now you can see I have watched a little bit of this. I got to about 2 minutes, and I decided I needed to say something about this. So, tilt this up a little bit so we can try and get the glare off the window out. We're going to watch this together, and I'm going to give you my thoughts.
Hey guys, Paul here. So, I've been going back and forth like for the past hour about how exactly I want to talk about this topic and make this video, so I decided to just finally hit record and say screw it, we'll go with it. So, this video is basically about the disenfranchised Yu-Gi-Oh player, or as I've kind of colloquially been calling it, the Yu-Gi-Oh zombie. And,
Okay, first off, calling people who are disenfranchised with the game zombies is an interesting approach. Noting what zombies are in the game, he's basically implying that traditionally, a zombie is a creature that has zero defense. So that's an interesting take to, an interesting spin to put on it.
the fact that, Konami is not the perfect answer to all of your Yu-Gi-Oh problems and that you have to kind of solve them yourself. So, what do I mean by all this? Well, basically, I have encountered in increasing numbers these past few years the sort of Yu-Gi-Oh zombie, which is a player who is dissatisfied with the state of Yu-Gi-Oh for some reason or another, and there are a billion reasons why they can be. Just for a bit of an anecdote, I was traveling to an event like I'll say like 3 or 4 months ago. Happened to go back card shop in the area, it's several hours away, and as we're walking up to the card shop, I see two other guys leaving the card shop, having this conversation just between themselves about like how like, oh man, this is like so some stupid thing about Yu-Gi-Oh they don't like, right? Like,
So, right there, to just blatantly call it stupid right off the bat, just because they disagree with something in the game that you love, is rather ignorant, in my opinion. Um, there's plenty of reasons to like and dislike a game, and if you have a valid reason for feeling the way you do, then why stomp all over that person just because you disagree with that feeling? A person's feeling and their perception is their own thing.
it's like, oh, this is so dumb, but that's how Yu-Gi-Oh is now. They just completely ruined it, and I can't believe this is whatever, right? And I think they were talking about maybe the way that games end really fast, like turn two, the game's over or something. And I realized that that's something that I actually hear at a lot of card shops and on a lot of online forums and kind of just everywhere. Comment section.
I wonder why you're hearing that everywhere. I wonder why it's become such a prevalent thought. Perhaps maybe because it really isn't the same game that it used to be. Perhaps maybe because they've taken the game that everybody loved and they have ruined it. Konami maybe took things just a little too far. At least, I'm in that camp. I don't play competitively anymore, Yu-Gi-Oh. I just don't see the point in it. I'll play with friends if they'll allow me to play my forbidden decks, which you guys know are insanely built and massive, bizarre things, but I'm not going to sit there and try to build a deck to compete when there's really no point in a game that ends in turn one, turn two.
Of Facebook and Twitter posts and everything, where there's this sort of there's this agreed upon and yet unspoken dissatisfaction with the game. Whether it's the format, whether it's the price, whether it's something else about Konami, whether it's the people or the metagame or whatever, Yu-Gi-Oh is ruined today, and it was
I love the air quotes of the good old days there. Yes, there were good old days of Yu-Gi-Oh! When the game used to be the game that it was designed to be in the beginning. When it was the actual game that, the show is based on originally. Before it was taken in all kinds of drastic direction and different directions just to market more cards. Essentially, that's what it boils down to. There are people who love the original Yu-Gi-Oh! And as for me, before I continue this video, I am in the camp of the disenfranchised, as I say, and for me, what ruined the game was these bad boys. I am not a Link Monster fan. I really, like, I have them in my decks because I've collected them to go along with the sets, but I mean, I don't really care for these kinds of creatures at all, personally. So if there was a way to play without them in decks and have fun, I would. In fact, many of my decks, even if I play the Forbidden decks with friends, I won't run my Link monsters in those decks because there's just no need for them to be there. I put them there simply because they're part of the sets or part of the collection, but or because I pulled a really cool rare. But I mean, ultimately, Link monsters ruined this game for me. I followed this game through synchros. I followed it through XYZs. It was tough adjusting to those new formats, but they still felt like the game. The game didn't end in one round. It was an actual duel between two competing armies versus what a duel is nowadays, where it's basically whoever has the quickest draw.
What exactly are those good old days? It could be a few years ago when you liked toss format. It could have been, in 2010 in Edison format, or it was Go, or it was kind of the vague idea of whatever Yu-Gi-Oh on the playground was back in 2002. And so basically, I have found that this group of player kind of can't really be satisfied, right? They think that maybe Yu-Gi-Oh was ruined when synchros were introduced, or Xyz, or pendulums, or links, or whatever. Or
I love that line. This type of player can't be satisfied. What in the world does that mean, Paul? How can you possibly sit there and say this player can't be satisfied? They were satisfied. They had a game they loved. And then that game got altered. And now it's no longer the same game. So give us back our game, and we would be satisfied, Paul, instead of letting it be taken these gross directions that ruined it.
maybe it was hand traps that ruined things, floodgates that ruined things. And also, there's kind of this idea that, like, if Konami would just fix this one thing, Yu-Gi-Oh would be fine. People are sort of waiting for the ban list, right? A few months pass, we haven't had a ban list, people get angry at Konami because they're like, well, where's the ban list, Konami? You're letting this horrible format, like kill the game, and it's so terrible, it feels awful to go to events. And the ban list comes out and people aren't happy with it. And
I'll agree with him on this point. A lot of people seem to think that the game can be fixed with a ban list or something like that. They feel like if there was just this one change that could make the game better. But the fact of the matter is, there's no going back, and that's what really sucks. They've taken the game to a whole new level where it's no longer Yu Gi Oh! It is an entirely different game with entirely different rules and meta, and it's something that I can't follow along with, and I know many other people just don't want it. But I agree that many people are also in the camp that if a ban list came along and it just hit this one card or it hit this one format defining thing, then the game could be fixed. And for me, it can't be, at least. But for those people, maybe that is true.
they're like, what? You didn't even hit the problem, or I can't believe you hit this but not this, or why did you hit my favorite deck? And it kind of it reads to me almost as though people are sort of waiting for this magical fix to Yu-Gi-Oh that's never quite coming. Now that isn't to say that Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't see constant improvements, right? Like I think that there are things that I made a video recently about how I think like Konami seems to be maybe easing up on printing practices, or maybe they're like hitting floodgates, which a lot of people don't seem to like, or they're hitting the Omni negate. That seems to be something that people don't like. But overall, there's not going to be like a ban list that sort of pleases everyone, and maybe more so than that, there's never going to really be a ban list that like reverts the game back to what you liked the most, the format that you wanted back, whether that's 2013, 2017, 2008, I don't know. There's never really going to be a ban list that like fixes all the problems. It can't fix all the floodgates, all the hand traps, all the negates, all the long combos, whatever it is that you don't like, whatever toxic thing you feel is ruining the game. No one ban list can quite fix it.
Absolutely agree. Totally agree with Paul on this one. There's no way that a ban list will ever fix this game because there's no way that the company will ever consider banning all of Link monsters. There's no way that they'll ever reset the format to a time before pendulums, if that's the thing that irritates you, or hand traps. Which, I mean, hand traps have been around since Karibo, so really, people who complain about hand traps, yes, they're way more prevalent nowadays, but that's not really a thing that you can really say much about. So, totally agree with you on this one, Paul, but I still think that we're in very different camps about this game.
And so it feels bad then when I hear players who feel like they're really not enjoying the game. They feel like they're kind of on the fringes. Like they feel disenfranchised. Their favorite mechanic doesn't work anymore. I mean, I hear this from Pendulum players where they're like, wow, Electrify's banned. Konami seems to hate Pendulums. They don't want to give us any of this stuff back. And the new Pendulum archetypes are you Pendulum archetypes or whatever. I hear people, complain about so many things. And it can almost reach a point where it's like, you have to find your own fun in Yu-Gi-Oh! I think that to rely on the idea that Konami is going to come in and fix anything with this game in the way that you want them to is just unrealistic, right? Like they're going to make ban lists, but they're probably not all going to be like 100% 10 out of 10 bangers for you specifically.
And once again, a solution to this problem will never be a ban list. No matter what they hit, no matter how they hit it, even for me, if, let's say, they were to, for whatever reason, actually go back and hit every Link monster on the planet and just say, you know what? We made a mistake. We should have never made Link monsters. And they banned all of them. Even if they were to do that, there's no way, A, that they would please everybody by doing that. There's so many people who are used to the format now that they just and enjoy the format. Like lots of people enjoy this new Yu-Gi-Oh, but it's not Yu-Gi-Oh. That's my point. And that's why I'm making this video. Yu-Gi-Oh is not the game that it used to be. You can call it Yu-Gi-Oh if you want to, but it's really not Yu-Gi-Oh anymore. It still uses a lot of the Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I'll give you that, but it's an entirely different game when you throw links into it. And for other people, that might have been pendulums, as Paul's saying here. And ban lists, in my opinion, are actually the cancer of a game because having to have a ban list shows that you've done something to this game that is breaking it. And the fact that you're breaking your own game because you can't take the time to power balance things properly, or you've decided to just keep putting cards out there and cards out there and cards out there like Konami does without any consideration about what the effects of those cards will be on the pre-existing sets that have come out. If they put thought into that at all, and if they do put thought into that, I really want to know what in the world their problem is, because they had a beautiful game and all they had to do was create new monsters and new archetypes but keep the formats the way they were. There was no reason to introduce so much new styles and mechanics to the game. In my opinion, you didn't need pendulums. Some people love pendulums, and in that, but I mean, pendulums were not the meta breaking thing. XYZs were not the meta breaking thing. People say they were, and they defined an era for sure, but ultimately everything kind of balanced itself out over the years until Link came along. That's where my opinion is, at least.
and that applies to everybody. Also, the ban list isn't going to help you like suddenly be the best player at your locals. The best players at your card shop are probably running the best decks, and I know there's a lot of discontent around like the idea of people playing the meta, right? You know, you're all meta sheep, and you're all playing the same thing, and that's what ruined Yu-Gi-Oh! But the truth is, that's been something that's existed for ages, right? Like people have always played the best strategies when they're available if you were actually playing in tournaments. And there's the whole kind of concept of like, you know, the playground Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta didn't really exist. It's something I take some issue with because I do think people like remember what Playground Yu-Gi-Oh was for them, and I think that was real and valid. But you know, there was always a competitive scene as well. So
Oh, we're getting an ad. Since we're getting an ad, I'm just going to put this over on Kaiba for the duration of the ad because I don't want to have YouTube give me crap.
Ascension WoW is a standalone World of Warcraft private server that
And
reimagines WoW in a brand new way. Instead of choosing a class,
yep.
it feels
So, couple of things Paul said there. One, I agree the competitive game always had a meta, and in some ways, meta sucks because, yeah, everybody plays the same thing, and that's kind of boring. But if you want to be in competitive and you want to succeed in competitive, you have two choices. You either run what's meta or you run something unique that counters meta. And once you run something unique that counters meta, it's no longer unique. So there's a lot to discuss there, but I mean, I can't disagree with that point. Playground Yu-Gi-Oh versus competitive, that's also something that's been in existence forever, and I think that's really something that needs to be focused on as well. Is there are these two groups, one that plays for fun and just wants to enjoy the game, and I think I fell into that camp more than I fell into the competitive scene, and so for people like me, it just hits that much harder that this game has turned into what it has and is no longer, as I say, what I would consider to be real Yu-Gi-Oh. It's Yu-Gi-Oh on crack, essentially.
like it's something where we cannot go back in time and make a perfect Yu-Gi-Oh. So what's the next best thing to do? Well, I've got a few options, and one of them is going to be a little bit harsh, but we'll start with the easier ones, which is first of all, you can accept it all, right? Like even if you don't like the way the modern Yu-Gi-Oh works, or you don't like the current kind of batch of cards or how Konami's running things, you can just have an optimistic glass half full approach and play a deck that came out recently that you do like, and try to push that to Master Rank One in Master Duel, or maybe try to get a top with it at a regional, even if it feels difficult. And
So basically, option one, play competitive. And that's not an option for anybody who is in my camp of I want to play the game for fun. So option one, not really helpful, Paul.
you can embrace, you know, the hand traps or the board breakers or the combos or whatever thing you don't like about Yu-Gi-Oh. Find a way to counter it, or find a way to learn about it, or whatever, and that alone can be fine for you. Conversely, you can sort of find your own fun in Yu-Gi-Oh. I think this is the number one solution I suggest to people is if you don't like how the game is going, play an alternative format. Play Goat, play Edison, play Trinity, play Domain, play whatever. Play any number of alternate formats. You can try out Speed Duel, you can try out Duel Links if you haven't already, try out Master Duel if you haven't already. Try something that you have not played because if the traditional TCG is not doing it for you, you don't need to, you know, sit here and like force yourself to enjoy it.
Now, this is a valid point. There's plenty of other formats out there in Yu Gi Oh! That you can play. Um, Granted, none of my forbidden decks would fit into any of those formats because I have been collecting for 25 years and thus have cards from every range throughout all my decks. My decks are more collections of eras of Yu Gi Oh! All defined together as one unique concept. So, for me, There won't be a format out there to play in. I have to find groups that will let me rule zero my decks, essentially, and just play for fun, which that does exist in some very small circles, but it is possible to find people who are willing to do that. That said, um, I don't agree with the overall point that he's kind of uh, skipping over here, which is basically that option two is essentially option one again. Just accept what it is and let me have my game because I enjoy the new format, which all the power to you. You love this new version of Yu Gi Oh! That's fine. But to call it Yu Gi Oh! Or at least to call it the Yu Gi Oh! That's always been around and say it's just the same game is not true. I can't agree with that.
Because it's just not really worth the stress when another ban list goes by and people don't, you don't like it, or another card is expensive and you don't like it. Like if a card's expensive, like Wanted, Seekers, Simple Spoils, buy some proxies, play at a kitchen table with your friends. Boom, easy. And then you can wait for the reprints and play it then. I think that you kind of have to like find your own fun in the sense of like what.
So if you can't afford the game, well, that's really too bad. Just get some proxies, play with your friends until it becomes cheap and it's no longer meta, and then you can get those cards and you can go play competitive and get your butt kicked. Because meta costs an insane amount of money, and if you don't have that money, that's really too bad. That's kind of interesting as a take.
That you and your friends agree is most fun to play. Do you want to play with hand traps or not? Find an agreement with that, right? Do something there. And then the final solution that I've been, I go back and forth with like whether or not I want to say this because I realize like I'm a Yu-Gi-Oh influencer or whatever, and so I shouldn't be saying for people to do this. But take a break or quit. If you don't like Yu-Gi-Oh, don't feel the need to like absolutely hang on to this game forever and let it kind of be like live in your head and make you angry without really there being like a solution or a way forward. So if you truly do not like the printing practices, if you truly do not like the format and you just feel that Yu-Gi-Oh is not for you anymore, then I think take a break from it. That can be like a 1 month break, 3 months, 6 months, a year, and maybe you'll come back and find that it's more fun or something's perhaps been solved or addressed and you just what it really was a you thing, like you needed some time.
I love that Paul just assumes this is a you thing, and that you'll find a solution if you take a break from the game. I have to agree with him that I had to quit Yu-Gi-Oh. He's right. The game is no longer what it used to be. It's not Yu-Gi-Oh, but they've kept the name and they've kept the cards and they've just twisted it into something completely new and it's not fun. Go to competitive, go to any store and try and play Yu-Gi-Oh and you're definitely guaranteed to sit there and play one turn for 20 minutes and lose the game. It's what's the point of it? It's just silly. That's not a game that's watching a person play solitaire. If you want to watch a person play solitaire, Paul, go right for it. But me personally, either I play solitaire or I play a card game with people. I don't want to watch somebody play solitaire. And I don't want other people to watch me play solitaire. That's why the game's called solitaire. It's by yourself. Anyways, let's let him finish his points.
Away from this game. It can stress you out when your favorite deck isn't getting support and the fan list isn't doing what you want and the decks are expensive. Okay, great. Invest in another hobby. Find something else to do. Or honestly, if you really feel like Yu-Gi-Oh has gotten that bad, you can even quit. Now, I don't suggest quitting. Obviously, I want people playing Yu-Gi-Oh, sure, but I don't think that you should put yourself through something that you don't like, dealing with a company you don't like, or a game that you feel, just disillusioned with, just because there's like a sunk cost fallacy or something going on. Like, you can always quit Yu-Gi-Oh. I'm not saying that that's like the answer, but just that I have found more and more players in these last few years who seem like they just don't actually enjoy it much anymore. And the final thing I have to say about this, because I'm sure some people have been like thinking it as
So that's interesting. People don't enjoy the game anymore, but you enjoy the game and you just basically want them to stop bothering you with regards to how they feel. Well, you're a content creator, as you said. You're out there putting out your thoughts. You're out there creating content about Yu-Gi-Oh and encouraging people to participate in the game. You aren't, as far as I know, sponsored by Konami, but I mean, I've seen that you basically are all in on their company and their game, and I mean, all the power to you. But it's not the same game. You cannot sit there and say that it's the same game as it was back in 2005 or 2010. There's a reason there are formats called Edison, called GOAT, and it's because that was a different format of the game because that was where the game was back in those times. And even though the game evolved to a certain degree, it always maintained the same base structure and it always maintained the same competitive turn to turn ratio where people would actually get to play with each other. That can't be said anymore. And you can't argue against that. What's your final point?
They've watched the video is I feel this way sometimes. Sometimes I feel like the disenfranchised Yu-Gi-Oh player. I mean, I get on here and complain about Yu-Gi-Oh like every other day on this channel, and like there are things that I really wish would go back to the way that I would prefer them to be, or that the bandits would just hit the stuff that I wanted to hit, or Konami would just implement these new printing practices and stuff like that, or they would communicate in this way. And I've kind of had to come to terms with the fact that the way I want Yu-Gi-Oh to go isn't necessarily the right way, and it's certainly not the way that it will go. I'm not the person making the, calling the shots, and so the best thing that I can really do is find my own ways to enjoy Yu-Gi-Oh. I've got kind of a house format group of friends that I play with. I play a lot of Master Duel, and I actually really enjoy that. And I still find just a lot of joy in kind of exploring old school parts of Yu-Gi-Oh. That's been a really fun way to distract myself. I've been playing a lot of old school games like Dark Duel Stories, Forbidden Memories, Sacred Cards, Eternal Duelist Soul, all those like old school games. I've been really loving those. They've been fun, and it's been a great way to kind of pull my mind away from just here's what's wrong with Yu-Gi-Oh, here's what's wrong with Yu-Gi-Oh, here's what's wrong with Yu-Gi-Oh. So I get it, right? I'm in a way making this video is like kind of hypocritical. It's something that I too am like working through. So I want to hear what people have to say about this. Are you one of those Yu-Gi-Oh zombies? Are you one of these players who feels disenfranchised with the game? What is it that kind of keeps you tied into it?
Again, just returning to that calling us zombies. I mean, granted, he's admitting that he has this problem himself, but I still don't really think that you can say that this is a defenseless argument. And yes, I agree that there is a glass half full argument that can be made, and you're definitely making that glass half full argument. And all the power to you for doing so. You love the game, you want to stick with the game, great. Unfortunately, it's just not the same game.
And have you considered maybe alternatives that, like, things, different Yu-Gi-Oh things to engage in to take your mind off of it? Or what would you suggest for somebody who's maybe going through this same issue? I'd love to hear down below in the comments. And without further ado, I'll see you guys in the next one. Faster.
So, my suggestion is fairly simple. Let's just close that for now. And we can watch Kyla sleep as I finish off this video. My suggestion?
It's everything you wish for. Your site traffic is skyrocketing.
Why is that going?
Until
There we go. I was gonna say, that's weird. Anyways, my suggestion is get into Magic. Magic is essentially what Yu Gi Oh used to be. It's a game that is simple enough that a kid can pick it up, but complex enough with strategy that an adult can love it. And that's really all what Yu Gi Oh used to be. Yu Gi Oh was a game I got into when I was in my teenage years. And I have grown up loving that game for 25 years, up until a point, and that point was Link Monsters. And regardless of what Paul says in this video, there's no going back. He's right on that. Regardless of all the other points he made, Whether I agree with him or disagree with him, I agree 100% with him on that. There's no going back, but I cannot call it Yu Gi Oh! I don't know what to call that game now, but it's not the game that